Welcome to Creative Confessions. And for anyone who doesn't know Sam, we do run in a lot of the same circles. So I'm going to be really surprised if you don't know Sam already. He is the founder of Thencan Designs and Local SEO Academy. And we met through Web Designer Pro. We actually met in person at the conference this last year, which was really awesome. Like seeing all the people that we had talked to online for so long and then seeing them in person was really cool. Another thing about Sam is he has hit it really hard with the MRR and reoccurring revenue, in which I've taken all the notes I can about that because it's so important to go from being a project-based designer to actually having that reoccurring revenue. And I've noticed that even since joining Local SEO Academy, the correlation between joining your academy, Sam, and my revenue, like there's a direct line there. And so I really appreciate everything you teach on that so that people can absorb that too. So welcome to Creative Confessions.
So excited. It's probably one of my favorite newsletters to read on Sunday morning. So
really awesome. That's great to hear. I love writing them last minute, sending them out all the time.
Like, I've been thinking about this all week, but I wrote it in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, so true. So tell me a little bit more about, I've heard your story on getting started with web design and the turning point in which you needed to add MRR to your services. But I kind of want to know just like a Cliff Notes version of how you got to where you're at now with like a team and just growing and everything. So I want to know about that.
Yeah, I feel like I've recently listened to a lot of the podcasts I've done. I was like, man, I talk a lot about my story. This is boring. People are probably sick of it. So I'll try to tell the shortest version possible. But basically, like a lot of people that are probably listening to this, I decided I wanted to build websites for small businesses. I got out there in the world and people told me they don't care because Squarespace or AI will do it for them. And I realized that what small business owners really want are results. And usually you get results through some form of marketing. For me, SEO was the one that kind of made the most sense because I've been playing with it a little bit and it seemed like fun. So I dug into that. And, you know, like you said, I got started through Web Designer Pro, and Josh Hall teaches, you know, how to build a business and not a job. And so as soon as I started to get some clients in SEO land, I was like, okay, I want to really systematize this and also like get a team around me. And so started to hire for web design, started to hire for SEO. And then this last year, I've been really focused on building up the systems, hiring even for operations and things like that, administration. And yeah, so here we are. We're starting the 4th year of business right now. It's crazy. We're in 2026. And yeah, I was just looking at the numbers. And so, you know, starting from $0 to 20 something to 100 something that first year, and almost hit 300,000 this year, but 260 something in the agency. And so, and most of that is built with the monthly recurring revenue. And so, you know, having that growth service, having that marketing service is what helps you get stable income. I feel like that's the issue that most internet service providers have. Is you get out there, you start to do a thing and you do project-based work, you get stuck in feast or famine. You realize you need to add on a growth service. So you start charging $200 a month for something. And then you get like 10 clients in that and you realize you're swamped and you're like, shoot, what am I doing here? And so, you know, the way to flip the script there is you need stable income. Stable income fixes all of the issues. And, you know, most people, when they go to start a business, they want to either have, you know, financial freedom or time freedom. For me, I wanted both, right? I saw a ceiling in the field that I was in and I wanted to get past that. But also I just wanted more time with my family. And so, you know, we're fresh off the holidays. I spent a lot of time in Christmas hanging out with my brothers, you know, helping them set up their technology. So that's some of the benefits. I went to a Rams game with my dad for his birthday a couple weeks before that. And I'm coming back for my mom's birthday. Actually this weekend, I'll leave for that. So it's like the time freedom is really one of the sweetest gifts that you can get. So anyway, that's the shortest version I can tell.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I have heard a bit of it before too. So coming into that, for anybody who doesn't know, like it's a great story. With that, I've noticed with you particularly, your growth has been really, really exponential. Do you feel like having that MRR service of SEO has propelled you into having that exponential growth? Because I mean, you've grown a lot in the past couple of years. It's very inspiring. So I'm just kind of wondering, do you feel like that's a piece of it? Do you feel like there's anything else that you can account to the exponential growth you've experienced?
Well, you know, I've not only have I had the chance to serve a few dozen clients through an SEO agency and build up a small team. But now I've had the ability to coach, overall, it's probably been around 100 students total. We have a little over 60 people in the academy right now. But what I've really learned by looking at all the different perspectives is like, we're all on a different journey. Right. And so I think, and I do the same thing, I was sitting down on New Year's Day, which was yesterday, and kind of reflecting, and it's so easy to get into a comparative state and to compare myself to these people on, social media that are making millions of dollars a year and be like, oh, why am I not there yet? And realize like, that's not really the metric I should be using. There's a good book, I think it's actually on the bookshelf, The Gap and the Gain. And it talks about, how we measure ourselves can either be in the gap or the gain. And in the gap is when you compare yourself to other people, or you compare yourself to yourself, but you do it in a negative way. And when you live in the gain is when you compare yourself to yourself and you only look at the growth, like where I was to where I am now. Or if it's, say, a negative outcome, you look for the lessons that were in it. And so that I was doing a lot of that reflecting this morning. And so, a lot of people ask me, how do you do it so fast? And, my joking answer is, don't have a partner, don't have kids. And there's some truth to that, right? I was at a point in my life where I could devote, 80 to 100 hours per week to this and not really worry about the repercussions because, I didn't have anybody else that was relying on me. And so, if you're, if you have a partner, if you have kids, if you're, a single mom or something like that, like, don't worry about like trying to match my timeline. Your timeline can look way different. Just try to build a sustainable business that's set up for the future. And, you'll hit all those marks that you want in the right time and whatever that is. So yeah, I guess for me, it's like, not having some of those responsibilities and working probably an unhealthy amount. I mean, that's really the secret power if you want to do it faster. Like it's time or money. I didn't have money to spend on paid ads. So I invested time, and I don't think that's a healthy, sustainable fashion, but it's, if you can invest that for a season, it can pay dividends, but you got to know that it's a temporary thing. And I've also dealt with some burnout and some, mental health issues over the last couple of years that I really had to face head on and dial things back, get help, ask for help, continue to get coaching and keep getting corrected because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. 3 years ago, I barely knew what SEO stood for. And so it's like, for me, I need to stay in a place of curiosity and know that I don't really know that much. And I think that's what's helped me get to this point, is just staying curious. And now I feel like life is getting a little bit more balanced. And, there might be seasons where I dip back into that old habit of working too much, but it's mostly a more balanced life where I get to ski and run and spend time with Peach, who got kicked out for this podcast interview, so she won't chew the mic like last time. And, times with friends and family and all that good stuff. And so, it's a balancing act, but I do think like you got to commit and you got to be serious. And that's what's worked for me. And now I'm trying to find that kind of balancing act where I can work less and make more.
I definitely feel a lot of what you were saying, the working all the time and the kind of burnout cycles and things. And one thing I've noticed about myself in particular, and you probably can relate to this too, is you feel bad if you're not working yourself to death almost, because you feel like you can grow so much faster. And it's like, well, if I'm spending my time over here, then I'm not growing the business and I'm not meeting my goals and I'm not achieving those things. So have you noticed as you're trying to deal with work-life balance of like putting those thoughts to the side, or do you still have those a lot of the times? What's kind of as you're going into work-life balance, what's your mentality towards that?
Yeah, I think one thing that really helped was just kind of getting the permission to, like, having a couple coaches in my life, just basically giving the permission, like, hey, like, this isn't your whole life. Like, there are other things that are more important. One of my favorite books is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In it, at the very beginning of the book, it talks about kind of like a fake funeral experiment where you sit down and you imagine you're at a funeral, and surprise, surprise, it's your funeral 3 years from now. And you're supposed to envision, like, what are people saying? Are you the workaholic that didn't spend time with the family? Or are you hearing the stories that you want to hear? Most people want to hear that they were, for me, I want to hear that I was a good son, a good brother, a good friend, showed up for my community, did the things I was supposed to do. It has very little to do with Thencan or the academy. However, I do want to hear that I was living in service, and that's what I try to do through my businesses. And so, you know, resetting from that point, I think helps kind of define like a northern star or like a guiding light and help like reset the compass. And so, you know, one thing that I think a lot of small business owners, especially internet service providers in particular, deal with is what I like to call the hum. It's just that business noise that's always in the back of your mind, right? And it really wasn't until recently that I noticed that it had just kind of turned off. And I don't know if it was because that receptor just got so numb from getting hit by dopamine or serotonin or whatever the right neurotransmitter is for so many years, where it just like said, I don't work anymore. Or I do really think it was like one of the phases of burnout. I just realized like I couldn't actually receive that stimulus anymore. And what I noticed was when I stopped getting it, nothing really changed. You know, it was like I had worried about my business for 2 years straight in the back of my head. And when I stopped worrying, the sky didn't fall, the business didn't collapse, everything didn't fall apart. And so it kind of gave me more permission to do that more often. And so I noticed like when I do things like hang out with my family now, like that used to be the thing that was ticking in the back of my mind at all times, but now it's really not there. And it's not so much a turning down as much as it feels more like a light switch than a light knob. And that's been nice. And I hate to tell people like, get yourself to the edge of burnout and you put your feet to the fire, because that's where it just turns off magically. I don't think that's how it works. I think a lot of it is, I've seen therapists, I've worked on my mental health, I've done work on meditation and things like that. And I've tried to be more mindful, and, I've built a lot of resilience up, and, everybody I think has to kind of go on their own journey. And so, but I think awareness is really important. It's like knowing that you're going to have this hum that's going to be there. And, maybe let me be the first person to tell you, like many people have told me, like, it's actually okay to clock out. Your business is not going to die because you stop thinking about it for a couple hours a night while you go hang out with your friends, or, pet your cat that likes to meow. We all know Lexia's got a cat at this point. If we don't, we should.
Yeah.
But, it's stuff like that. But at the same time, we talked about, it's like, as you get more time back, you kind of have to be like mindful about what you do with that. And I'd say one thing that's really been happening for me in the last 6 months is buying some time back and then watching it get filled with unhealthy habits, looking at that stupid freaking rectangle and getting trapped in, YouTube short rabbit holes for 2 hours at a time. And it's like, yeah, I'm pretty like, hi, my name is Sam and I'm a dopamine addict, like the,
Same.
the healthy dopamine hits are, when things are happening in business and we're making growth and we're, chasing shiny object syndrome and testing out new website tools, right, that we probably shouldn't be playing with. But it's like but it's so easy to fall in the traps of other things. And so it's like, just one thing I've really been working on lately is just like being bored and just accepting it and living in it and being like, oh, like, that's right. Like, you can just like stare at a wall. And it's funny, like when I let that silence sit for a couple minutes, that's when I start to hear the right things. When I actually like can welcome it in, it's like, oh yeah, like we do need to think more about AI search this year. Like, how come we've never really looked at local service ads? And it's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing as the owner. I'm not supposed to be going in and filling on the SEO titles anymore.
Yeah. And how has do you think that hum has decreased as you've grown a team too? Because it doesn't feel like the weight of the business is all on your shoulders anymore. I'm kind of curious about that, because as you know, one of my goals this year is to fully trust my team and to grow a team. And so those things are very, very hard for me to do because, again, I'm a perfectionist and a little bit of a control freak, admittedly. So I'm just wondering if that having a team and having that support behind you has kind of helped you be able to shut off your brain a little bit.
I think the short answer is yes. I'm a bit of a control freak, and I think I'll never be able to fully trust 100%, which I think is okay. I've heard this before from like some of the leaders I've looked up to in my life, is like, you want to trust people fully, but you still got to hold them accountable. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, we need to make sure that things are being done. And so but that's a balancing act, right? And that's something that I've really, really, really been working hard on this last 6 months, because there's a fine line between looking over somebody's shoulder and meddling and holding them accountable to make sure they're doing the things they're supposed to do, which we all actually want. Like that sounds like, oh, that's lame boss talk. But actually, like when you show up to a job and they're just like, go do the thing, you're just like, well, wait, wait, how am I supposed to do it? Like, how do I even log in to the thing? Right. So it's like, you need to train people, you need to show them the systems. It's better if you have SOPs. They can also help you create those things, but you need to give them guidance. Like for you, you know, there's the visual vibe way, just like there's the Thencan way. And it's like, we need to pass these things down, and there's some knowledge that only lives in your brain. And it's our duty to kind of get that out of our brains. And that's something I'm still working on. But yeah, I think the more I get out of my brain and into other people's brains, it gives me like the freedom to be like, okay, now I can take a big step back. And there's, like I said, there still needs to be like a layer of accountability. And I think that's kind of where the last little, like, you know, 1 to 0.5 percentage point of trust still lingers. But like the people I have working around me right now, like I feel super lucky and honored that every single one of them is working with me in whatever capacity they're in, including Alexa. She's doing a great job, by the way, everybody. And
Thank you.
it's like, yeah, and so it does make it easier. You know, it's like, I know that, you know, if it was versus me and Eleanor for who's going to write the SOP, I know Eleanor's going to do a better job. She's going to get it done faster, and it's going to be right probably the first time, you know. If it's in, you know, same thing down the list. I don't need to repeat it all, but it's like, and so, yeah, I think that the big thing is like hiring people. If you hire people you can trust, then it's going to be easier to trust them. But that doesn't mean you can just step aside, right? And I think that's something that I really had to learn last year, and the lessons have still been lingering into this past year. Like in 2024, that was like, I thought, okay, I just hire people and get out of their way. It doesn't quite work like that, right? And I think that's like, there's so many lies the talking heads on the internet tell us, even though there's 2 talking heads from the internet talking to you right now on this podcast. But it's like, everybody tells you like, you only need 6 figures to make it, which isn't true, because everything costs more now. And there's taxes and expenses. And the other thing too is like, they say, well, as soon as you can, get some help, because that's going to solve all your problems. And like, no, the dog's still going to bark at you, and your kids are still going to talk back to you. But, you know, it might make things a little bit easier in your business, but only if you do it the right way. And what I've been starting to learn is like, you have to train people. You know, you gotta kind of hold their hands and teach them the way that you do things there. And then you can take the big step back, still hold them accountable, but take that step back. And I think all of that coming together might have contributed to the hum going down. Maybe it's less of a mental health crisis and more of just having people around me I can trust. Maybe you're right.
Well, I would say that, man, I would have a hard time because, like, again, I look at some of the stupid mistakes that I've made this past year, and one of them was hiring a VA and then not integrating her into my system and creating a whole different project management system for her to use. That was so dumb. But I realized I was scared to let people into my world. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but like with my business, it's like I hold everything so like to me that it was hard for me to let people in and let them do those things and actually take ownership and control of different tasks. Did you have trouble with that when you were first hiring people?
Well, I've had trouble with that specific part at times. Yes. I would say there's some things where I feel like I just wasn't that good at it. And so I think it's easier to let go of that. And I think that's why a lot of people, like Josh makes this recommendation in one of his courses, right? He says, you know, start by hiring the people that you're bad at or you don't want to do. What's it called? FERC or something like that. Go watch his course if you don't know what it is.
Something else.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's the work that like causes the most friction, right? And so it's like, hire those people first. But for me, I just chose the things I wasn't very good at. Also, the stuff I felt would be easiest to hire for was project-based, because then I didn't feel like a commitment to have to pay that person. Because like payroll, really expenses in general, can be one of the fastest ways to run yourself out of business. You know, if you get yourself behind the 8 ball very quickly, you're not making enough money to pay for everybody. And so that's a danger. But if you're doing project-based work, the nice thing is you can kind of like, you only got to give them money when you have projects. And so for me, like when it came time to make those first decisions, it was designer and developer for websites specifically, because that's always going to be project-based. And so that part was actually pretty easy. Now, did I still make a ton of mistakes along the way? Yes, because I wasn't, you know, I didn't do the training and things like that. And another like big mistake, I thought about this today, was, you know, I was thinking about a designer I had on my team for a long time. And it's like, there were a lot of times where I was making like monetary decisions because, you know, let's be real, when you're first starting out, you just don't have a lot of money to play with. And so I noticed that, you know, I would be making decisions to save a couple dollars here, but really like the most valuable assets on your team are the humans. And so it's like, you have to be fair, and you got to do what's right for your business, but at the same time, like a couple $100 here and a couple $100 there shouldn't make or break your business. And I would rather have that money go to the people now. And again, just like everything, like you got to learn those lessons, by accidentally using a different project management system with the VA, or underpaying people when you should just give them a couple $100 more, so that you care about them. And so it's easy to get hung up on the mistakes and think like, oh my gosh, like look what an idiot I am, I make these mistakes, so obviously I shouldn't be a leader. But it's just part of the growing process, right? We got to make these mistakes. And if anything, I've noticed, especially like in anywhere that I work, like if I make a mistake, I'm much more likely to not make that mistake again in the future. And because when that stove is hot, I've already touched it, I got a lot of burns, but it's like a bunch of different stoves in front of me. And so now I got a bunch of stoves I don't touch, but I know there's a lot more that I'm going to go out and try to touch later. But hopefully I don't have too many scars.
Yeah. And even in that, like just what I've noticed over this last year in my own business is, you go into this and you think, okay, I've got it somewhat figured out, I can do these things. And then you get to like working with clients or doing these things, and then you realize you just start slipping, or you break your own boundaries on things. That's a big thing that I've had to deal with. And so you're constantly like learning your own mistakes that you don't even know are there. It's like a constant cycle with that stuff. It's just crazy. Are there any things this past year that you think you could definitely improve on next year? Like if you're looking back and you're like, I could have probably done that better. Are there any things that you're looking at for the future?
I think, yeah. So, you said like, did I have a hard time letting stuff go? And I let go of the stuff I felt like I wasn't good at first, but the things I've had a hard time always letting go of are the things I think I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the phase of business that I'm in right now, is trying to get myself out of not everything, but as much as possible, like to an extent. Like there's a balancing act between like just completely disappearing to having like a fully functioning business that you can step away from. One challenge that I've made for myself is in March, I'm going to Hawaii for a week, and I'm planning to not bring my laptop, but I've also been thinking about maybe deleting Slack and Gmail and a bunch of other stuff off of my phone, so that I can't even log into those things and I can't even be reached. There's a book, I can't remember which book it is. There's so many books I've read, but there's a book that said basically you don't have a business unless you can walk away for a month and it's still running when you come back, maybe even better than how you left it. Now, they say, don't start with a month. They say, start with a week. And so this is my week. I've been kind of building up to this moment. And so, looking at some of the things, there are certain things that literally Sam is the only one that has access to it. And, it's kind of the like, doomsday scenario. What if you slide off the road and bad things happen, or even if you're just not able to get to your computer for whatever reason, could somebody step in and take over for you? And right now the answer is still no. But by March, I think it's March 7th, like it needs to be at a point where people could, log into the QuickBooks if they need to, or log into, whatever. And so it's like being able to access all the things and having people around you that you can trust to do those things. And then I think that's going to open up like the next level. And I'm kind of already pre-planning, I haven't decided yet, but I'm pre-planning maybe something for September. Not quite as expensive, going to be a lot cheaper for that one. But maybe another 2-week vacation in September to kind of get down to that next level. Because there's a lot of, one of the things that was harder for me to let go was like the SEO strategy. But I went out and hired an SEO strategist who was good. And we had some conversations in the early days about like, why do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? We were very aligned. I taught him some things. He's taught me some things. He keeps his ear to the street better than me. And so it's like, I can just trust him. He's following our flow and using all the stuff he's learned from all of our clients, all of his past clients. And it's like, I'm literally just getting in this guy's way by having to approve his plan. And so it doesn't mean I can't still have insights at times when he asks for it, but I don't need to get in his way. And so like letting go of that was probably the biggest thing I had to let go of last year. And there will be a bunch of little things this year I need to let go of. But it's just, like you said, it's like a relearning process constantly that I just need to keep relearning.
And with that, could you imagine like when you were working 80 hours a week and it was probably just you and maybe one other person? Could you imagine being like, no, I'm going to take off like a full week? Could Sam back then even imagine being able to do that now? Or did that seem like out of the possibility?
Yeah, it seemed out of the possibilities. I remember really not even that long ago, like not feeling comfortable, putting my phone completely in do not disturb, or, taking a full weekend off, or not working at nights, and, that those are like literally the recent like wins in business land, and they could have happened a lot sooner, and some people are better than that than me. Earlier I was saying, the way to get the success is to just work unhealthily for a little while, right? But I think, like, again, like if you set yourself on a different timeline, if your success is 6 figures in 2 years, and maybe 200,000 in 4 years, then it's like you can actually still have those things and maybe not feel all the stresses that I have along the way. But yeah, I think trying to take off for a week would be impossible not even that long ago. And one of the big turning points was, I don't share about this often. I say that every time, but then I end up sharing about it on podcasts where there's hundreds, if not thousands of people listening. But my family had a house fire about 1.5 years ago. And that was pretty, that was a big situation. It was like an accident. It was like electrical fire. Nobody's expecting something like that to happen. And, I just basically packed a bag and went out there and wasn't sure what would be next. I think I came back to my hometown, which is about 3 hours away, twice that month. It was my birthday month of all things. And they lived in a hotel that month. Like, it was very hard. Right. And I just remember, like, as I was leaving, I sent a loom to my clients and I sent a loom to my team members. And at that point, there was kind of a loose collection of, freelancers. And, for legal purposes, IRS, they're always 1099 or international subcontractors. But anyway, during that time, one of them said, hey, what if we just had a Slack? So that way there was a place for us to communicate. And I was like, because I basically gave them a challenge, like, I'm going to need help. I don't know how. And I just, I'm open to any ideas. And that was like one of the starting places. And that's where it really started to feel like the transition from like I to we started to happen. It felt like it was me with some people to like we are now a team. And, it's like the team has changed. And I think that's, that's part of business too. You look at a lot of businesses, like there's turnover, people go get new opportunities. And honestly, that's kind of that's a cool part of it. Like, to know that like you help somebody grow on their journey and now they're on to the next step and you get to bring in this new person, and that's awesome. But yeah, like I know if that, I don't know for sure, but I feel like that was a very big turning point. And so again, I don't wish family emergencies upon anybody, but like when like these, these forks in the road happen, you can look at it as this thing where it's like, oh gosh, like I should just shut down the business, which is a genuine thought that I had. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this month. But it can also be the turning point where you have to make the decisions that make it so you can get to that next level. And so that's kind of like, I don't know, that's like anytime something presents itself, I'm just like, this might be the beginning of the next level. This October, we had a long-term team member leave. Then we had another one have a baby, and then have a death in the family. And man, 2 of us had to basically work 4 people's jobs for a month. And that was really hard. But I remember, like, as we went into that, I looked the other person in the eye on Zoom and I said, hey, this is about to be hard, but this could be the beginning of the next chapter where we're operating at a higher level. And we literally just had a meeting before this. And, she was sharing with me, like, I think we're in a really, really good spot right now with where everything's at. And it's also nice that we're not doing 4 people's jobs as 2 people. I was like, yes, see, look, we can do this. So anyway, I don't remember what the original question was, but I wanted to share all that.
Yeah, I definitely found that kind of similar to those like life events. Is Josh had a similar one with his daughter in the hospital. And so I'm like, I hope it doesn't take a traumatic life event for me to get my crap together. But I think it's not because I think it's because it like forces you to, like, you don't have another option. Then it has to happen. And so then because of that, then you're able to grow from that. Would you say that you have similar feelings on that?
Yeah. And, I hear about this, and I just reread 7 Habits. So it's fresh on my mind, but it talks about how like there are these moments in our life, just like this, just like Josh in the NICU, just like me in the hotel with my family and the dog, freaking Peach, little puppy Peach, just ripping everything up in the hotel room. Sorry, hotel people. It's like we had these pivotal moments that had us, shift things. And it's like, we've all had this. Maybe it wasn't a business, but you've had something happen, some external factor where you had to kind of go above and beyond. And I remember the book talks about how like you don't have to have these things necessarily happen to you.
Mhm.
You have lived experience where you've had to do these things before, where you really had to hunker down for whatever reason, and you're able to push through, like all the crap went to the side and you're able to focus and move, right? And it's like we can create those scenarios without there needing to be this external trauma. And so it's like, and I think we've all also experienced this too, where we've had these seasons where we were able to lock in, right? And it's like, holy smokes, look at what I got done the last, month, the last 3 months, the last year. Like it can go for a really long time. But then it almost feels like there needs to be like a break afterwards to relax, because we can't kind of always be in that mode. So it's like finding ways to kind of ebb and flow out of that. But yeah, I do think like these pivotal moments can be helpful, but I think they can also be created if we can really harness like focus, mindfulness, intentionality with our businesses. We can say, okay, like this needs to be a season where I focus on this, or like, this week I'm going to go all in on this, but for the rest of the month, I'm going to chill, or like half and half or something like that, because it's not sustainable to live in that state where it feels like there's a saber-tooth tiger coming after you and dealing with that cortisol dump. But like it can be good to kind of get us in that state where we can really focus.
And one thing that I've noticed about you with focus is it seems like, and I think I mentioned this to you at ProCon, I was like, dude, how do you do it? Like, how do you get like locked in on this thing? And then the next thing you're just like so focused on it, and then you just like run miles with it. And then you excel so fast. Has that always been something that you've been good at, or is that a skill that you had to learn?
I'll say it's a skill I had to learn. I don't think I lived a pretty distracted, unintentional life back in my 20s. So to say the least. And so it's definitely a skill that was formed, like I said, I think the resiliency and mindfulness can be the foundation of a lot of life skills. And I think that was kind of the starting point. But, I think commitment is also the big thing. And also like the absence of distraction, which has been an issue for me lately, which I shared about earlier. And I think that when I first took the leap, and I did the stupid thing where I left my job too early, but I had a little bit of cash in the bank, so that helped. But I remember like literally being out there, that's what it felt like. I was out there, but I was just, in the corner of my bedroom, which is just on the other side of the hallway. But it's like, I'm out there, hustling in the corner of my bedroom, being like, where's this next website going to come from? And there was a fire under my ass, and it was a good thing that I had that sense of urgency that I have to figure this out or I'm not going to be able to pay the bills. And like in my mind, I knew the truth was that if things got bad, I could always just get a part-time job. If things got worse, I could just give up and get a full-time job. I was originally going to go back to school for computer science, because surely AI is not going to replace all the programmers. Maybe it was good I didn't do that. But anyway, like, like I'm a smart guy, I could figure something else out. So like, it's easy to get stuck in that mode though. Complacency, I believe, is the devil. And so I sat there and, kind of, maybe I created this false sense of urgency, but it was a good thing where I was like, if I don't figure this out, that probably wasn't healthy. But I remember thinking at times, being like, if I don't figure this out, I'm gonna be homeless. So let's go get some websites, and it was like ebbs and flows and things like that. But, and then I really had that big realization where it's like feast or famine sucks. And the whiplash of like success and failure. And, thank goodness I've worked on worth enough to know that like having clients and not having clients has nothing to do with my inherent worth. That is within me. And it is unrelated to that, because I'm sure a lot of people deal with that, because in my past life, I used to deal with that with external factors.
I'm still working on that. So
yeah.
What you said is true. I'm all like, I need to have all my clients and everything needs to be perfect. But
it's not true. You have worth. It is inherent, and it has nothing to do with external factors. Just know that. You are complete as you are. But it's nice when there's more money in the bank, right? But that doesn't have anything to do with your worth. So, but I was at that point where I realized, like, if I just had stable income, that would cause a lot of the stress to go away. And so that's where the new lock-in came in, where I was like, I got to figure this out. And, I did my normal Sam fashion where I had to do everything. I remember going to my score mentor which is like a offshoot of the Small Business Administration. And I
Mhm.
said, all right, I'm going to do everything. I'm a digital marketer now. I'm going to go figure out ads, email marketing, everything. She says, hey, Sam, why don't you just pick one thing, get really good at it. And when you're done with that, you can think about the next one. And what's crazy, Brooke, is I listened to you, and here we are, I guess it's a little over 2 years later, and we're still just doing SEO. And so, I'm glad that, again, I stayed curious, was teachable, and somebody gave me a different path. And I said, all right, well, let's try this. And I listened, and then, just went all in on that. And yeah, I think your question was like, how do you just lock in? And I think it's just like, you kind of got to know what's most important, right? Just keep reprioritizing. And my best weeks are when I sit down and I plan the whole week out, and I kind of map it to not just my vision for maybe the year, but also like for my life. Again, when you sit down, you do that fake funeral experiment. Thencan Designs is not number one, right? It has to do with Sam, and then family, and then friends, and relationships, and things like that. And then it gets to the things that make you money. And yeah, how can I have my values be underneath the business? So having all that in sync and finally aligned, what it feels like for the first time in my life, I don't know, it just makes it easier to do these things, even if it's not really easy.
Yeah. Is there something that keeps you from distraction as far as, I know you said you've dealt with a little bit of distraction, but in business, like with shiny objects, like for example, the new local SEO Academy website, I was like, Andy did a freaking fantastic job on that. I was like, oh my gosh. And I immediately was like, oh, let me check out Framer. Let me go see what that's about. Let me go like down this rabbit hole in YouTube, and let's go see if it's like easier. Is Framer better than WordPress? Is this like, and it went back and forth in my head for like a week. And then I was like, Alexia, like, shut that down. Like, that's not going to help you. Learning this new thing is not going to help you propel to where you need to be. Like, you've already spent time, money invested in things for the things that you've been working on. Why would you go and derail yourself like that? And so I had to rein myself back in. And I noticed when I started my journey, it was easier to get down these rabbit holes. But now that I'm like into it, it's easier for me to self-realign and be like, okay, this is going to be a waste of your time if you spend any more time thinking about this. Like, this is what you need to do now to be able to get to your goals. Do you feel like you've had that kind of thought mentality?
Yes. I feel like as entrepreneurs, especially in the internet service space, like we have to, like, things move faster than normal, right? You don't get 11 weeks to do a course. You get a weekend, you don't have a whole year to implement something. You kind of got to do it in a quarter. And so I usually recommend like a pace of every quarter, like sitting down and essentially reprioritizing your whole business, because things are going to change. Alexia today in the start of January, Alexia start of October. What was different? I'm sure it was a lot of stuff, right? And then let's go back to July 1st. And let's go back to April 1st, where we're going back into 2025, and then back to a year ago today. Like, think about where your priorities were different. And the thing for a lot of people, and this was the same thing for me, is like when you're first getting started, you don't have a lot of clients, you don't have any team members. And so what does being productive look like in those early days? Well, part of it is efficiency, right? And so you're trying to figure out these tools, you're honing your skills, you're learning these things. And so it makes sense to sit down and say, Elementor or Divi, Webflow or WordPress, 17 Hats or Moxie or ClickUp or Asana, or like, which ones am I going to pick, and it's like, it's so easy. And then, the next thing comes out and you're like, this could be better. And it is true. Like, sometimes we really have to sit down and evaluate our tool stack and say, are these going to be the tools to serve me best? But I think if you do that, if you sit down, you give yourself literally an hour, a quarter to sit down and say, okay, what are the most important things for me now? You're going to start to see that as you grow, as you get team members around you, as you have clients to serve now, like, that's the big thing. Like, once you have clients to serve around you, you have less time to play around in what tools matter. And you just have to figure out, like, okay, I've picked my tool stack. Now I have to build systems around them. That's the new priority. I'm just going to do that. And then you can sit and have a little think about, like, should I put my SOPs in Google Docs, or should I put it in ClickUp, or should I put it in, and you'll do the same thing, right? We all do it. I saw the Framer backend and I was like, oh, hold on a second here. We check this out. This is really cool. Can I do this? Can I do this? Yeah. And kudos to Andy for getting that up so quick. That website's sick. But yeah, I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the shiny tools. I think Eric Dingler is the one that said, like, something along the lines of, like, it's so common to hear early on, internet service provider people get so caught up in tools, like, should it be this or should it be that? When really the question they should be asking is like, how should I be setting up my pipeline? How should I be doing lead generation?
Mhm.
How can I get more effective on sales calls? Because that's what's really going to grow your business. And I know I get caught up in talking about money a lot because it's important. If you don't make money in this world, in the day and age we live in, where everything costs a lot, like you're kind of not going to make it very far. And I like to think of money as an analog for freedom, right? If you
Mhm.
can get a little bit more money, what that does is it can open up your time, which can open up your relationships. If you get more money, it makes it so you're less of a penny pincher and you can open your wallet up at the end of the year, maybe give back to things you care about. And, it's an analog for so many things. And so it's like a lot of people equate money is, you know, inherently evil. And that's not true, right? It's like, what is the motive behind this money? What are we going to do with it? And it can definitely be used for good, and it's used for good all the time. Just because it's not usually doesn't mean it can't be. And so yeah, it's like, you can get hung up in the tools, but I say get hung up in what's going to make you more money, because that's what's going to unlock the freedoms you actually started your business for. If you stay in that why, you stay in your values, then more money should grow, and then you'll get to actually do those things you set out to do in the first place.
I feel that a lot, especially the money and the freedom and the time freedom of that, because now that I'm where I'm at in business, and I will not rich by any means, but
Hey,
I've
me neither.
noticed, yeah, I've noticed that it's like the problems that I've had, I'm like, okay, can I just pay a thing and then this be taken care of? Like, I don't know what that mentality is now, but it's like, instead of, spending hours on this thing, if I could just pay a little bit of money to get this taken care of and it done, I feel better doing that. And I think that's going to help me outsource and hire this next year. But I've noticed that flip a little bit, where it's not the money that's necessarily like before. It's like, oh, I'll just spend a whole weekend figuring this thing out and like do this. But it's like, I don't have that time to do it. So if I can find someone or have this thing or pay the whatever I need to do to get this thing, that I'm more willing to do that and think of it as an investment of like, I can always make more money. More money will come in. Now, is that the best mentality right now? Probably not, because I'm not like, setting my six figures, a big office and all this stuff. But, it's something I've noticed. It switches. It's more of like, hey, I don't have time to do this. Money can help me accomplish this thing with less time.
Yeah, it could definitely be a shortcut, right? And it's
Mhm.
funny because it's like I still do the same thing. I just recorded a new module for the local SEO sales course that's coming out soon. And I need to edit those videos. And the first time I did it, I had like a buddy that like needed the experience. They didn't like need the experience, but he was going back to school for it. So he was like happy to take it on and do it for like a massive discount. But like that opportunity is not there anymore. So I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, I could pay somebody in town, but I know how much that's going to be. And I
Mhm.
have my normal editor, but I'm like, what's she going to ask for? I was like, I want like a fair price. And again, I'm doing the same thing I literally just said was the lesson I learned last
Mhm.
year, was to pay people a fair amount. And it's funny. I was like, why am I sitting here trying to, like, am I really? And I'm like literally about to like load up Premiere Pro and start cutting the video myself, because I'm like, there's not that many mistakes in there. But it's like, dude, there's 13 lessons just in this module. Like,
Mhm.
stop. What are you doing? And I just, had a conversation with my editor and said, how do we feel about this for the whole course? And she said, that's fine. And I'm like, okay, why am I worrying about this? And I just
Mhm.
know like money will come back in, a million different ways. And also like, you know, being able to do a thing is great. And I think like there's so much value in that, especially early on in business, but like being able to empower somebody else to do a thing, like, you're not only like, you're expanding your capacity of what you can do by like a different level when you do that. And also you're empowering this person to build a skill, and who knows what kind of impact that's going to have on their life. And that's the thing I've been trying to like remember too about all this, is like, okay, like there's like human lives involved in all of this. And when I sit down and try to, hold on to one more task for Sam because I can't let this go, it's like I'm actually like limiting the amount of letting somebody else on my team grow, which is selfish. And I shouldn't be selfish this year. So anyway, I need to clip that part out and put it on my hype tape this
Yeah.
year.
With that, I had a thought earlier when I was on my walk, and I was thinking like, even if my business, like, for some reason all the clients dried up or anything, I feel more confident now than I ever have about being able to find a way to make money. Would you say the same about yourself? It's like you've kind of built up that resiliency and these skills and the business knowledge that it's like, hey, if things came down to it, I can figure this out. Like, it's not the first time I'm doing this again, type of thing.
Yeah, I think, I don't know about you, but the first year of my business, I think it was about every hour I thought my business wasn't going to make it to the next day. And then I think the second year it was probably every day. And now I think it's down to like the healthy amount of like once a week. So it's good that it's progressed like that. But yeah, I have the same thought where it's like, man, if I really had to start from scratch, like I think I could do it faster, or I could do it maybe even in a more like kind way to my mental health. Like, I don't, and there's so many opportunities out there nowadays. So I do think about that sometimes. And, I think that goes back to the gap of the gain, right? It's like, you can live in this place of like, oh my gosh, what if all the clients disappear? That I'll be ruined. Or, if all the clients disappear, that would be hard. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But, all of the things that I've learned are still there. Nobody can take that away from me. And I can start building from there. And it won't be from scratch, because now you have a ton of networking, a ton of connections, and a ton of experience that you never had before. And so I try to tell people like, don't, like, if you have to get that part-time job, because a lot of people do at some point, right? That's not a failure. That's just, you're just paying the bills. That's okay. You can dig right back in when the time is right. And maybe it's just not the right season of life, right? Maybe you need to jump back in a couple of years, or maybe this wasn't the right lane and you just got to find a different lane. And, you were struggling to hit 100,000 as a web designer, but then you go out and do something else and now you're a millionaire, right? Who knows? I'm probably talking small change to where you could be in a couple of years. We all know Alexia is going to be the richest of all of us someday very soon, but
that's the hope. That's the hope, isn't it? For 6 figures in 2026. I think that just all of it together now. But yeah. So as we're ending the podcast session, I guess I should start calling these podcasts. I've been just calling them interviews because I don't want to be labeled as a podcaster. I feel weird about that still.
Whether you like it or not, you're a podcaster.
Yeah. Each week on my newsletter, I give a confession, and that's part of Creative Confessions. And so, Sam, I wanted to see if you had any confessions about anything we've talked about or anything in business. Now, you don't have to say something that you've been holding a deep, dark secret since you were 12 years old, but something fun.
I'm sure you don't want to hear about that? No, I'm just kidding. My confession is this. Local SEO is easy. And I think a lot of web designers can spin their wheels on what the growth services they want to add to their business. But I think local SEO is easy. That's why I chose it. I didn't choose it because I know how to speak English well. I didn't choose it because it's this really complicated thing that I don't think everybody's going to learn. I chose it because it's easier than national SEO. It's way harder to build authority in national SEO. I chose it because you don't have to appease Google's algorithm and pay for ad spend like you have to do with paid ads, or say social ads with like meta ads. And so that's why I chose it. Now, the part where it does get complicated is it's easy, but it's really a bunch of easy things. And because there's a bunch of easy things, it's hard to say, well, wait, do I do this? And then do I do this? Or do I do that? And then do I do that? And that's really where a lot of people get lost in the sauce and then they just give up. The other part that's easy about local SEO is talk to any publisher and ask them how they're doing right now since AI overviews kicked in. And they're probably going to, I don't know. They're not going to be having a good day because AI overviews decimated a whole industry. Like, we know that AI search is changing like real business landscape right now, and it's going to keep doing that. But if you look over the last 2 years where Google's been experimenting with AI in the search engines, it hasn't really affected local that much. And when they experiment with it, they still show a map pack. And so I don't feel like it's resistant to AI, local SEO, but I do feel like it, at the end of the day, like if you're a person that wants to work with somebody in your area, that's it. Like that equation is not going to change for a long time until we get a lot of robots going around. And so, yeah, the method for how we'll connect that might change a little bit, but like Google's probably going to be the primary place. And if you can figure out how to get them to show up when people are searching for local stuff on those AI assistants like ChatGPT, that can be like an added bonus. But yeah, my secret is that local SEO is easy, and it's the thing that I think you should add to your business if you want stable income.
And would you say that selling local SEO on sales calls is harder than actually doing local SEO?
It depends. I feel like it depends on your experience. Some people come into, internet service businesses with a sales background. And so if that's the case, like, it's probably easier for you to pick up sales. But I don't know about you, but I didn't have much of a sales background. I like, what did I used to say? I slung laptops at Best Buy for a couple years in college, but that was pretty much my only sales experience. And for anybody that doesn't know, Best Buy is not on commission. So it was like, if I don't get the sale, I'm still getting paid. So, I just feel like that wasn't really in my backbone. And so, one of the hard parts for me going out to sell websites when I first started was like, I have to actually sell to people. It's a very hard skill to build. And so, like I said, some people might have that skill, but a lot of people don't. Learning the SEO can be hard for some people. Some people are a little bit more technically minded, can pick it up quicker. But I think, like, if you have the systems laid out in front of you and you're like, here's a flow that you can follow, then I think that makes it easier for you, which can be hard to find on the internet. But there are some places out there that have it. And I think that mastering the sales process, like learning all of that, I like to say it can be the greatest bottleneck of your business, but it's the easiest to fix. All you got to do is get a little bit better at the sales call. If you can get a little bit better at the sales call, then you'll be able to sell more immediately.
And speaking of that, don't you have something coming out to help people sell local SEO on sales calls?
I do. And it's not quite out yet by the time this drops. But if you go to seosalescall.com, there will be a wait list, and then eventually more information on how to sign up for that. And so it's just one module from my local SEO sales course, which is really an entire sales engine course, which will be exciting, teaching about lead generation and pipeline and all that stuff. But this particular lesson right here is all about the sales call. And the example I use in the modules is like, imagine that you get 6 sales calls a quarter and you're just not that great at sales. So you close 1 a quarter. All right. I mean, it's not that bad. But what if you could just close 2 more per quarter? So you're getting 3 per quarter. All right. With the way I teach how to sell high ticket local SEO, you can charge $1,000 a month. That's about $12,000 a year per client. So if you're only getting 4 clients a year, that's still about $50,000 a year. But we all know $50,000 ain't enough. But if you can close 2 more calls per quarter, that gets you to $150,000. It's a lot different number, right? So that's why I say it can be the biggest bottleneck of your business, but it's the easiest to fix because you just got to get better at the sales call. And a lot of people try to fluff it up by calling it a discovery call. No, screw all that. It's a sales call. Let's figure out how to do it, and not in a salesy way. How can we do it in a genuine way where we stay values based and we like really honor the business that you've been building intentionally, by just, making the sales call a little bit more effective.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited. I'm going to include that link for everyone so that they can get the first scoop on your new sales course. So I'm very excited for that. The scoop on the sales course. So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam. It's been amazing having you here. And do you have any final words for our audience?
Yeah. Alexia is amazing. She's done work for me in the realm of branding, marketing, and just strategy in general. And so if you're subscribed to her subscribe to her newsletter and you listen to this podcast, because she's a podcaster now, you should consider hiring her. I'm just going to shameful plug. Like, I really think that she's great, and hopefully she'll give me some money back if some people sign up off of this. But no, like, I really like working with you, Alexia, and it's been fun to watch your journey. I think, we were kind of, actually, what's funny is I think you joined Web Designer Pro off a comment I made on a live YouTube video. Is that right? Or something like that.
Yeah, it was one of Josh's circle videos. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited to join Pro whenever I feel like I'm ready, which I kept putting it off because I'd listened to his podcast for like probably 1.5 years, 2 years before that. And then I remember you commented on there, and it was just funny. That was like our first interaction. The next thing I was in Pro.
Yeah, I remember being like, that lady. I was like, Josh, where's my affiliate commission? And then we got to meet in person at ProCon last year, which was super fun. And now I had the chance to work together. And now look, I'm a guest on your podcast. So what a journey it is to watch people grow up in this business. And I really believe, Alexia, you're up to some big things this year. six figures in 2026, I think, is a low mark for you. I think you'll leap over that hurdle, no problem. And so anyway, I'm looking forward to watching your growth.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sam, and thank you again.